Hello there.
I just had the chance to see Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. Now, I have been covering leaks on this movie for well over a year. I knew pretty much exactly what was going to happen in the film, but I gotta tell you, seeing it all unfold on screen was just insane. This was the craziest monster movie yet. We are going to discuss it in this video. If you guys enjoy my MonsterVerse content, consider subscribing. Let's get into it.
The Atomic Fair.
Okay, so yeah, the absolutely the most insane MonsterVerse movie that we have seen. Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire hits theaters Friday. If you haven't had the chance to see it, go check it out before you watch this video. Because I'm going to be getting into spoilers, but without spoiling, I'm going to tell you I did like the movie. I don't know where I'm going to place it in terms of my favorite MonsterVerse movies, because it's really, for one, it's a tough call to begin with, and for two, I'm still kind of taking in and absorbing the movie. Of course, the fanboy in me wants to say that it's the best MonsterVerse movie of all time, but I'm not going to cave into that, so I have to give it a little bit of time to let it kind of sink in. But there is no doubt that, like I said, this movie was just off the wall crazy. It was the most conceptually insane MonsterVerse movie, and I think overall it had the most Titans out of any MonsterVerse movie as well. There is so much to discuss about this film, and there's a lot of changes even from Godzilla vs. Kong, and I think it goes even further into the crazy territory in this film, specifically like if you talk about the way Godzilla fights, the way the scenes are shot, the way the CGI is, and some of the concepts that this movie covers, including some of the fight scenes in the movie. Everything is just off the wall crazy, but we are going to get into it by discussing a little bit about the characters. Now, starting with Godzilla.
What we do here is go back.
Now, I have to be honest, this movie is definitely Planet of the Apes featuring Godzilla, but that is, totally okay. That's not a problem with me. I think that the movie was still really good, but Godzilla's role in this movie is definitely minimal compared to past films, but I don't really think it's a terrible thing, and I actually don't think it's as small as some people are making it out to be. I mean, he still pops up every 3 or 4 scenes, but it's his overall role in the movie. Godzilla is sort of solidifying his place as just a protector of nature. That kind of seems to be what Godzilla definitely is. Of course, they say that in the movie. There's an entire scene where they talk about a prophecy and stuff like that, but Godzilla is definitely solidified as just this force of nature. He's not really good, he's not really evil, he's more of a neutral character, and overall I think he was really well done in this movie. One of the craziest things about this film was the way that Godzilla was fighting. Now, in the beginning of the movie, the way that we see Godzilla fight is that he moves very quick. He's very quick on his feet compared to past MonsterVerse movies. If you compare this to the 2014 Godzilla movie where he was supposed to be moving more like a bear, this is certainly not that. This Godzilla moves quick, he is agile, he throws punches, he almost fights like a human, and at one point even does a swan dive in the movie. When we're talking about the various versions of Godzilla that we see in this movie, we see the standard form of Godzilla that we have seen since Godzilla King of the Monsters. We see a cracked sort of EMP blue version of Godzilla, and then we also see the evolved version of Godzilla, and then towards the very end we almost see an evolved pulsing version of Godzilla towards the very end in the final fight. There was so much to process visually in this movie that I'm definitely going to have to see it again, but I think it's a movie that's satisfying for so many MonsterVerse fans and sets up so much more for the future of the MonsterVerse. So overall, in this movie, Godzilla was really well done. I think he's really a badass character, and it's very obvious that Godzilla isn't necessarily good. He doesn't really care. He's kind of almost like a crabby, cranky anti-hero type monster. We see some scenes and shots in this movie in the very beginning where there are helicopters swarming around Godzilla, and he's swatting at them, not in a way that we would typically see where he's trying to destroy them, but almost like flies where he's just trying to get them to kind of go away, and he's kind of being a little bit crabby. But then the biggest takeaway for this movie for Godzilla is just the massive change in Godzilla's character, the way that he moves and the way that he is shot and the way that the monsters are shot in general in this movie. It's much more like a old Heisei era film, and you can feel that in the way Godzilla is characterized in this movie. Drop in the comments down below though, let me know what you guys think about Godzilla in this movie. Moving on to Kong's character. Now, he is very much the central character of this movie, and it goes without saying that Kong is completely badass. He is like a Kratos-like character. He never backs down from a fight in this movie. There's periods where he's cornered by the tribe of apes and fighting them off with an injured arm, and he's still trying to go one more round, kind of like a Captain America sort of vibe going on. But there's very much a Planet of the Apes kind of aura around this whole film that I kind of felt watching these characters on screen. Now, they're not quite as animated as they were in the Planet of the Apes movies, but these gigantic apes that are present in the Hollow Earth reminded me a lot of some of the sequences that we saw in Planet of the Apes, specifically with Koba's character. You can kind of compare him to Scar King a little bit. He's kind of the false king. And then some of the shots with the ape tribe. Now, these are kind of like some, I don't know the way to put it. They're very savage looking apes. Some of them have, little bits of hair on them only. Now, I think it goes without saying in this movie that Kong's character is completely badass. This dude is like a Kratos or something in this film. He never backs down from a fight. There's scenes where he is cornered by the ape tribe of Scar King, where they chase him down and his arm is hurt and he still isn't backing down from a fight. Kind of a Captain America vibe going on there. And really, overall, Kong is still the central character, of course, similarly to Godzilla vs. Kong, but I think even more so in this movie. We see Kong's character kind of go on a journey, and there's like 10-minute stretches in this movie where we only see Kong and maybe Zuko interacting, or Kong and the tribe of apes interacting, where we don't see any humans at all. I think it's really cool when you see the shots of Kong entering the ape tribe and entering Scar King's lair, and you see him match up against the other apes, and he's just a complete brute. I mean, he's able to take down, most of these apes no problem without even breaking a sweat. He's by far the biggest and most jacked ape out of all of them. All the other ones look like, malnutrition crackhead apes compared to Kong. Other than Zuko and of course Scar King, who is a more lanky, agile ape, but even when he fights Kong, when they first meet, Kong seems to overpower Scar King. But overall, like I said, in this movie, Kong is the central character. He is completely badass, and he definitely carries the movie similarly to Godzilla vs. Kong. Now, if that bothered you in Godzilla vs. Kong, then it's going to bother you in this movie as well. But I think it's a dynamic that's working out well in the MonsterVerse. I just want to see them introduce a little bit more Toho monsters. Now, other than the main two characters, we had Scar King, who I think was overall a good villain, but I can see how a lot of people are going to shred this bad guy to pieces and kind of just consider him a weaker villain. Because the thing with Scar King is that he's not quite as strong as Kong. He does get overpowered even in the beginning of the movie when Kong and Scar King are fighting, or I guess in the middle of the movie. That's something to discuss a little bit later in the video. But yeah, in the middle of the movie is around where Scar King is introduced, and they have a confrontation, and Kong even overpowers Scar King in the beginning. So they set the precedent that Scar King isn't supposed to be this powerful ape, but he is the smartest ape and the only villain that Godzilla and Kong have ever fought that has an ape army of his own and was controlling Shimo with the crystal. He was very smart and even was making fun of Kong in one scene about the metallic tooth that he had. I thought that scene was it was cool. It was that was where I was getting a lot of the Planet of the Apes vibes, and he was reminding me a little bit of Koba from Planet of the Apes. I think that was the villain's name in the second Planet of the Apes movie. But yeah, and then of course when Scar King dies, he gets kind of frozen by Shimo and then shattered completely to pieces. And when he gets frozen, you can kind of see his eye there moving around. That was a crazy scene as well. I think overall Scar King was a good villain. And I think one of the best things about Scar King was definitely his intelligence. Now, other than that, we had Zuko, who was kind of the son of Kong character. There's not much to say about him. What you saw in the trailers is pretty much what you get in the final film. He was a good character, and it'll be interesting to see how he develops in the future, to see him as sort of a teenager Kong in a Godzilla x Kong 3, which I'm sure is coming. That's something to discuss in another video. But this was a good introductory movie for Zuko, and he actually plays a pretty big role in defeating Scar King by throwing the axe at the crystal that controlled Shimo and shattering it to pieces and breaking the mind control that Shimo had from Scar King or whatever. So Zuko plays a pretty big role, not only in the movie, but in the way that Scar King is defeated. Some other notable scenes are the scenes where he bites Kong on the finger, and then also where Kong throws around Zuko at the other apes in the beginning of the movie before Kong finally meets Scar King. And then, of course, we had the real big bad of the movie who was being mind controlled, the powerhouse of the film, Shimo. Now, I think she was really well done, and she was much more pearlescent than I was expecting. Her scales kind of reflected and had a rainbowy like reflection at certain points in the film. I'm not sure if I'm the only one who noticed that, but it had like sort of a pearlescent glow to it at certain points in the movie, which I thought was cool. I do think Shimo is an interesting Titan, but I'm waiting to find out, one, if Shimo is actually an alien, which were what a lot of the leaks were saying before the film came out, but of course a lot of stuff gets scrapped on the cutting board and in the editing room. And another thing I really wonder about Shimo is if she is a similar species to Godzilla. Now, like I said, what you saw in the trailers of Shimo, similar to Zuko, even though you didn't really see a whole lot towards the end of the marketing campaign, if you paid attention to those trailers, you did kind of get a look at Shimo, and I think that was kind of representative of what you got to see in the film. I think she was really cool in the final fight. She was definitely super powerful, but didn't quite have the threatening presence that, for example, Ghidorah had. Now, I don't think either Scar King or Shimo had that threatening presence like Ghidorah had. Ghidorah had almost an apocalyptic feel to him, which was amazing to see on film. It was like the Ghidorah that we like dreamed of as a kid, you know? But Shimo is well done. You get to see a little bit of her personality there at the end when she breaks free of the mind control and assumes the role of hero by freezing Scar King. And then, of course, at the end of the film, we see Shimo standing beside Kong as he is standing over the tribe of apes, almost seeming like his pet or something. So we're going to see how Shimo's personality is developed in the next film. I'm sure that we're going to get another Godzilla Kong movie. This movie is seeming like it's going to be fairly successful and has a decent impact on the culture. Compared to past films, Godzilla vs. Kong seemed to have kind of changed the game and seems to have been the Monster vs. Avengers, I guess, that kind of kicked off the popularity of the Monsterverse, and now we have Godzilla x Kong, the New Empire, and we will see where Adam Wingard takes it from here. Now, other than that, we had the human story, which is kind of wild because I didn't see other reviewers talking about this, but for about the first 30 minutes of the movie, maybe even 45 minutes, it feels like almost a human adventure explorer film, like Journey to the Center of the Earth or something. Now, of course, we had shots of Kong intermingled in there, but the human story is very much a discovery story of them discovering the Hollow Earth. There is a subplot between Jaya, the main female protagonist. Her name is slipping me right now, but I really think that overall the human story in this film wasn't really that major. I think really the human story existed in this film to service the monsters plot. The only person who really had their own subplot in this movie was Jaya, and even her story serviced to eventually awaken Mothra and eventually help out the Titans. So, you know, make what you will, but I think in this movie, the human story for the 30 or 45 minutes or maybe an hour of screen time that it has is very minimal and really services only to kind of have them discover the Hollow Earth and eventually help out Kong and eventually help out Godzilla. There isn't a whole lot of mother-daughter dynamics like what we saw in Godzilla King of the Monsters. There isn't a whole lot of human relationships like what's happening in Godzilla vs. Kong with Millie Bobby Brown's character. We don't see a lot of that in this movie. I do think Dan Stevens was kind of a standout just because he was kind of the quirky, goofy character. I think him being a Titan veterinarian was an interesting concept, and I think them setting up Jaya and the Iwi tribe to sort of worship Mothra and sort of play a role in almost being a Easter egg for the Mothra twins, or a tribe that worshipped Mothra in the past Toho films. I think that was also a great addition, but really for the most part, I don't have too much to say about the human story in this film. Another thing I'm kind of skipping out on here is Mothra. Mothra being brung back by Jaya. I thought the way that she was summoned was very cheap. I was hoping that she was actually being regrown in a cocoon. They don't really explain how the energy summons Mothra, only that Jaya is the key to bringing Mothra back. But she just kind of appears like, you know, she's being teleported in Star Trek or something. She doesn't really give birth like she's coming from a cocoon or even start as a larva. Now, some other plot points before I wrap this video up that really kind of stick out for me were, for one, Kong is definitely lonely in this movie. That's definitely an interesting plot point that they have in the beginning that we've seen in other movies but plays out well in this movie. There were certain shots with Kong that reminded me of the 2005 Peter Jackson film when King Kong has his own cave. Godzilla taking down Tiamat, I think that was a cool scene. I think it went by a little bit too quick. But I think overall it was a good scene. I think this movie really proves that when Godzilla's on a mission, he's completely ruthless, because the way that he kills Tiamat is actually pretty brutal. And then Godzilla powers up into almost like the power of burning Godzilla, but just in his standard form with the evolved version of Godzilla. So overall, the Tiamat fight was pretty awesome, and then you had Godzilla charging up on a nuclear power plant, which I thought was epic. There was a scene there where you actually got to see Godzilla absorbing energy, which you haven't really seen in very many movies in the past, but we actually got to see in this film, which I thought was well done. There's a scene with Kong where he actually fights this eel-like titan, which was really badass. Reminded me a little bit of Kong Skull Island, but I wish we would have actually got to see the scene where Kong beheads the Titan, because we see this Titan kind of, it's this giant anaconda eel-like Titan that wraps around Kong and is choking him out, and then it cuts to Zuko walking in the woods. Then you just kind of see the head of the Titan get thrown into the woods, and Kong steps out from the trees with his axe, and he's kind of wet from being in the water. You see that he killed the Titan, and then they eat it for dinner or whatever. I also thought that Scar King's roar reminded me a little bit of Ghidorah. I don't know if I'm the only one that picked up on that, but it reminded me a little bit of Ghidorah from Godzilla King of the Monsters, the way that his roar kind of stuttered there. I think it was kind of a questionable choice for them to introduce Scar King over halfway through the movie. A lot of what we saw in the trailer is most of the scenes with Scar King that we see in the movie. They're extended, the scenes in the film, but most scenes with Scar King have at least small cuts of them in the trailers that you can find online. We see characters like Doug return. We see these gigantic electric bat-like titans that play a bigger role in the movie. I think they were called the Verticine or something like that. I noticed that while the CGI is plenty fine in this movie, I do not actually think that it is as well done as Godzilla vs. Kong. I do know that this movie is cheaper to make than Godzilla vs. Kong. I know this movie costs somewhere around the $150 million ballpark range, which is perfect for a film like this. Warner Brothers seems to understand where the MonsterVerse lies in terms of box office success and is adjusting the budgets for these movies accordingly. We see skeletons for lots of various different titans, including a gigantic Leviathan-like titan in this film, which just blew my mind, and I thought would be insane to see something like that on screen in a Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Final Wars type film. And then of course we have the scale of the Titans in this movie. Now what's crazy is there's some scenes in the Hollow Earth between Kong and Zuko where they're eating food or whatever, and you can kind of see there's small trees on the ground that are definitely in scale with a normal sized person, and even though it's CGI, it almost looks like an old school Toho film. It is crazy the way that they scale the Titans in this movie. I'm not totally against it at all, but it definitely almost looks like the same sort of scale and shots of the old Toho Godzilla movies in the way that they were scaled with the model buildings and trees and stuff that they had on the ground at that time. It looked very similar to me. The CGI, the way that it was styled, looked similar to me. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but there were also some perspective shots where we saw the human beings from the ground, and that brings me to the final fight. And I'm going to talk about some stuff I don't like about the movie, and we're going to wrap this up. So in the final fight, they basically break through the Iwi tribe's barrier that they have that's sectoring them off from the rest of the Hollow Earth. It's a barrier that's similar almost to the barrier that the Wakandans have in the Marvel movies, but it's this big, thick, web-like barrier that seems like it was definitely built by Mothra. It transmits this sort of camouflage like green coloring, and then it kind of has these EMP pulses when you touch it, but they end up ripping it open, the barrier, and confronting the Iwi tribe. Now what happened was when Kong was injured, he got brung to the Iwi tribe where he could be healed, and he was tailed by one of the apes from Scar King's tribe. when the ape-tailed Kong, he found that there is a portal in the deeper part of the Hollow Earth that will go straight up to the surface world. So he reports back to Scar King, and him, his army, and Shimo go there to confront Godzilla, Kong, and the Iwi tribe. Now, of course, Godzilla's not there at first, but Kong ends up going into Cairo, Egypt, to convince Godzilla to go down into the Hollow Earth and to have a final fight. Now, this fight between Godzilla and Kong is nuts. I reported in some leaks that Godzilla was going to get his teeth knocked out, and he didn't quite get his teeth knocked out, but he did get punched in the face quite a few times there by Kong. At one point in the fight, Kong has him pinned to the ground and is just wailing on Godzilla, and it seems there for a minute like I don't think Godzilla would have lost because he's like a gigantic nuclear bomb, but Godzilla definitely was getting winded there, and I think Kong's Beast Club played a pretty big role in that. Now, in the middle of that fight, when Kong is hammering on Godzilla and Godzilla's heating up basically to finally blast Kong, or I'm sorry, correction, Kong is actually dragging Godzilla towards the Hollow Earth. Godzilla goes to blast him, and then he is pushed back by an EMP blast from Mothra, where Mothra and Jaya convince Godzilla to help Kong. They jump down into the Hollow Earth, where this gigantic fight ensues. And we see Mothra webbing up different apes. We see Zuko throwing rocks at different apes and trying to stop the different apes. We see this one crazy ape that had been following around Zuko and Kong and kind of harassing some of the other apes in the movie, fighting Zuko. And then we got Godzilla just kind of jumping around in the air. This is all in zero gravity as well, because of the human plot and what the Iwi tribe set up with the crystals. And then at some point, it kind of shoots into Rio de Janeiro, where the rest of the fight takes place. Now, it is crazy because some of the moves that they do in this film are almost like some WWE tag team like moves, especially Kong and Godzilla. I think at one point Godzilla like suplexes Kong. It is an absolutely insane fighting style. It's totally different than any of the other monster movies and what we've seen before. If there's anything that's close to it, it's the end of Godzilla versus Kong, but even that doesn't match what we see, especially in this final fight between Godzilla, Kong, Shimo, and Scar King. But it, like I said, it ends with Scar King getting frozen solid by Shimo and then getting shattered into a million pieces by Kong. We see the end of the movie where Kong is now the ruler over this ape tribe, and he is now King Kong. We don't hear the name said, but it is obviously implied by his king-like status. And then we see Godzilla resting back in the Colosseum in Rome until he is once again needed, because that is the way these movies are seeming to work with Godzilla. There isn't really much else that they can take Godzilla's character. Kong seems to be an anchor point where they can develop some character for him, and it seems like Planet of the Apes featuring Godzilla seems to be the routine of these MonsterVerse movies. Now I'm going to get into some things that I did not like. Now, for one, I have to mention that I think the CGI, like I said, did not look quite as good as Godzilla vs. Kong. I noticed that because the budget was less, the CGI seemed to take a little bit of a hit, and there's a ton more CGI than this, even than Godzilla vs. Kong, so they seem to be adequately matching that. With some less good shots, they're throwing some lens flare in there to kind of make it to where some shots they don't have to do as much CGI. They can just have a lot of sun reflecting in the shot and doing lens flare and stuff like that. It's pretty obvious that that's what they're doing. It's totally fine with me. A lot of the CGI still looks up to par with Godzilla vs. Kong, but there are some shots that looked a little questionable to me. Godzilla vs. Kong was still the same way, though. There were a few shots in that movie where I was kind of like, eh. I don't really like that Scar King is introduced over halfway through the movie, and I don't really like that this movie loves, in this MonsterVerse and just modern day Hollywood, loves to use exposition and PowerPoints to explain to the viewers what's going on in the movie. I think it's a horrible trope, and it's kind of present in this movie as well. I thought the ending music in the final fight was very indicative of the Avengers, and I don't really think that that was something that was unintentional. I think they're very much trying to get the MonsterVerse similar to the Marvel movies, which I don't really know if that's a bad thing, but I don't really know if it's a positive either. And really, I guess this can be viewed as a negative, is that Godzilla is going, the MonsterVerse is going so far into the extreme with some of these concepts that I can really see some general audiences just kind of being pushed away from it. or just kind of mocking it or making fun of it. A lot of the people that are like that, I can definitely immerse myself in a crazy world, but I can see how some people think it's silly or stupid or whatever. In fact, in the theater that I was in, there was actually a girl who was 2 seats down from me who was kind of occasionally mocking the movie with just her hand gestures, or mocking Kong when he threw up a beast glove, whatever, stuff like that. But I can see how that would push some audience viewers away, especially those who think that every Godzilla movie should win an Oscar. I'm not really sure how they want Godzilla to be written in these movies. I guess just to only be a terrifying force of nature. But them leaning into the Showa era craziness is totally okay with me. But comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. And really, for this review, that's all I got. So for Planet of the Apes featuring Godzilla, let me know what you think about it. Comment down below. And for this video, guys, that's all I got. So until the next one, be safe and stay well. Bye-bye.